Imagine you lost your job. You couldn't pay your rent, and you were evicted. It happens every day, but there's always hope. And that is what we're going to be talking about on this episode of Thurston County Connection. Hi, I'm Commissioner John Hutchings. On this episode of Thurston County Connection, we're going to be talking about the agencies that work with Thurston County's homeless community. Joining me today is Scott Hanauer, CEO of Community Youth Services, and Derek Harris of Community Youth Services, and Gabriel Ash of Drexel House and Catholic Community Services. So thank you for being here. I also want to touch on the stigma of homelessness and or transiency and mental health and youth as well. We all judge people, we all profile people, and for many people that is there's an element of safety involved in that. Because if somebody looks a bit dodgy, somebody may go to the other side of the street. So this is going to be dealing a little bit about stigma, as well as what we can do for folks in our community. So go ahead and roll the format for this, by the way. We'll do an interview. We'll show you a clip of an interview that was done. Then I'll ask our panelists some questions, and we'll discuss that individual and or services available for the individual. Then we'll show another clip and do the same format throughout this program. Thank you for being here today, and let's get started. Please roll the first clip. I'm John Hutchings, and welcome to Olympia, meeting people in our community. It's 2 degrees above freezing, just to give you a reference. So whenever you're watching this, you can see why we're all stuffed up and why there's snow out here. I'm with Aaron, and Aaron is a person in our community. And this is all about the breaking of the stigma and the stereotyping of folks that are in need in our community. So this is Aaron. Aaron, how are you? Thank you for letting me come out and interview you today.
I'm hanging in there, best I can.
I greatly appreciate it. We talked a few days ago, and I told you we would be doing this, and I have no idea what you thought of at the time or since, but you shared some interesting things with me. And again, this whole segment is about busting the stereotype or stigma that people have for various people, no matter who they are in the community. One of the things I've always strived to do is stop painting people with a false motive. And so I would imagine you get painted with a false motive out here, standing with your sign at the street corner here. So let me start with the very beginning. How long have you been standing at the street corner asking for donations?
I think about 4 years.
4 years. And then let me ask you, you guys, have you seen Aaron before?
Yeah, I have. I pass him every morning.
And I pass him every morning too. And have you ever talked with him or engaged him in conversation?
Briefly.
Oh, you have?
Briefly, yeah.
This is not judgment. It's not a judgment of you folks. But when you saw Aaron and you see the way that that he solicits donations and such, what comes to mind what do you think of when you see Aaron?
Well, with Aaron in particular, I just think he is a guy that just is the best at what he does. I mean, I feel like he would do the best at whatever he's doing, because he has this sign that he flips when you go by, and when traffic starts to roll through, it says "Have a happy day" or "Have a nice day" or something like that. And he just smiling and waving, so I wave to him about every morning as I go by. But for me, it's just thinking about that is a friendly, nice guy on my way to work. I appreciate just his personality. I mean, that comes through. If you just spend any time, you pass him enough times, you can tell that guy's got a good, outlook on life.
Scott?
I think for me, Hutch, is that I'm always reminded whether it's with Aaron or anybody who's on the streets and experiencing homelessness, that none of us are too many paychecks away from that, or too many, life traumas away from that. And so it's, looking at it from that perspective, it's much easier to walk in their shoes, and, that any of us could be out there.
Yeah. What do you think, Derek? Because you've engaged him in conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same things that everybody else has said. Is he's really nice to interact with, and he has a really good attitude, and that's doesn't really tell like the full story for what's going on with him. And things that have come up for me, and some of the clothing that he wears and those kind of things. I've always wondered, is he a veteran? I'm a veteran myself, and those kind of thoughts go through my head of that's a marginalized population that we're working on in this community to try to reach functional zero with by 2020 as part of our 5-year plan. Mm-hmm. And so I have that provider side that's also looking at, well, how can we get this individual connected with the services, and what would that take?
And I've had the similar attitudes or projections of him as well. My wife and I travel the roads out there in Southeast Olympia chronically, constantly, all the time. And he's always upbeat, he's always positive, he's always waving and talking to the birds, talking to the signal and such. And my wife and I have always said the same thing. I wonder what his story is. Because everybody has a story. What's his story? And he's quite different than some of the other folks that we'll see out in the neighborhood standing by the off-ramps or some of the other street corners. Vastly different he is. So I told her I'm going to find out who he is, and I did. So let's go ahead and roll the rest of the tape, please, in the interview. How was that for you standing out here?
Well, the first 7 months, I cried probably every day. Yeah, I hated it.
Why did you hate it?
I just never saw myself doing this before, Just never thought I'd have to.
And was it wintertime you began doing this?
This is summertime, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're in your 50s, and a little bit, just a little bit, if you don't mind, about your health history. What kind of issues you have going on health-wise?
Well, I have epilepsy. I have a lymphedema in the lower legs, which means they swell up. So I have to wear compression socks, expensive compression socks.
Yeah.
I've got a couple other health issues, high blood pressure, things like that. I guess you get that as you go older.
Yeah.
High cholesterol from all the fast food I eat. Doctor's not happy with me.
Yeah. You had some type of breathing issue you talked about.
Well, I've got sleep apnea also. Mm-hmm. So I have to use a CPAP machine. Actually, it's a BiPAP machine. It's one step.
It's a step up from a CPAP.
Right. And every month I have to get supplies for it. Filters, the face mask shield. Uh-huh. Every 3 months you have to get the tubing. You have to get the water chamber, things like that.
So you buy your medical supplies locally.
Yeah.
And are you up to speed on payments to them, or are you upside down?
I'm a little bit behind.
Okay.
A little bit behind. Yeah. Quite a bit behind.
And I understand you had said that you'd gone back to school. I would presume, I'm presuming, you can correct me. You went back to school to try to make things better, perhaps?
Yeah, tow truck drivers, just making sure I'm okay. Well, I went to school.
That's nice you have people checking on you.
To help pay, it happens all the time. It's cool. Yeah, it's really cool. And there's a snowflake now, too. I just saw a snowflake. I went to school to help pay some medical bills I had. And I guess it was my sister's idea, go to school, get a student loan, help pay those off. And that's what I did.
Okay, but so now you're paying off student loans. And you have medical bills to pay, and are you homeless?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I do have a roof over my head.
You have a roof over your head.
Thank you, Lord.
Yes, and so you're protected and warm at nighttime and in the morning. Then you choose to come out here, but are you disabled?
Yes.
Okay, and so you receive some community or some subsistence from
the government.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that enough to survive on?
No, it's not. No.
All right, so you rely on donations?
Yes.
So let's get to the stereotyping now. There you are, you're standing on the corner. You're not crying anymore.
No.
I can't even imagine the humility to stand out there. I can't imagine it.
I lost that, so thank you, Lord, on that one. But yeah, you lose that soon.
But you're standing out there and people come by, and I don't know how to, out of 10 people or out of 50 people or 100 people, how many people help you, how many people completely put on the blinders and ignore you, they don't want to see you, how many people flip you all kinds of obscene gestures or verbally assault you.
Probably get flipped off maybe 2-3 times a day. Yelled at maybe 4 or 5 times a week, sometimes multiple times at a time. You know, this one gentleman seems to think I own a house and a big beautiful car, and he'll drive by and yell, "Mow your lawn," you know, and I'm like, huh? And he finally drove by close enough to me where he started yelling, "Yeah, you have a big beautiful house and you have a big beautiful car you drive." And I looked at him and said, "Then why am I standing here if I have all that? I'd sell the house first." But of course he rolled the window up and went on. See, a lot of it, when they yell something, they'll yell something and roll the window up and leave. Or they'll do it as they're driving by. So they had the last word, which I always find strange.
Well, I find it cowardly.
It's that too.
And there are a significant amount of people around this country, and I'll just say this country, but even locally, that propagate the same theory. They hear a story, an urban legend, or they read it in the paper. Oh, I followed this female, and she was had a sign out and collecting money, and then somebody followed her and did a whole expose. She got into her Lexus, she drove off to her mansion, and yet she's not paying a penny, and she's getting tax-free money. Well, that becomes an urban legend, and now you are guilty of that. Yeah, I see the snowflakes coming too, but you're guilty of that. And so that's that false perception that I want to kind of bust. Right. Now, are there people out here soliciting for funds or for donations that that are substance abusers, alcoholics, and tweakers, and or maligners or malingerers?
Yeah, there's quite a few.
Okay.
Yeah, probably about 75%.
Are you addicted to substance?
No.
And are you purporting to be a veteran and you're not?
No, I'm not. I'm not a veteran. If someone asks me that and they're going to give me money or whatever, if they ask, I always say no.
And when somebody drives by and they see you in these pants and this jacket, or the hat and the gloves, what do they say sometimes?
Sometimes,
it's a minority, but
yeah.
What do they say? Sometimes,
like this one guy says, "Boy, you sure are dressed nice for being homeless." And I've even told him I'm not homeless, and he said it again. I told him I'm not homeless. He said it again. You know, one time I explained to someone bought me this ring here. Someone gave me this coat. They gave me the gloves. Why shouldn't I wear them?
Compassion.
Why not? Why not wear them? You know, why put on a false? Like, why put dirt on me or everything else and look like I'm just, you know, rat poor and live on the street when I don't?
And you're not out here with an animal or a dog. You're not out here with babies or children.
Or a cane or a wheelchair or anything like that, which I've seen. I've seen that before. I've seen people out there with kids, two or three kids.
And now you also have an old, I'm sorry, but it's old, tall, skinny Starbucks traveler mug.
Yes.
And you're able to fill up locally for 54 cents because it's just a fill up.
Right. It's an old. It's only at that one Starbucks, and it's an old. What do you say? Policy they have. They don't do it anymore. So I got grandfathered in. So yeah, it's 54 cents for a cup of coffee.
Put your gloves on, man. Aren't your fingers cold?
They're getting there.
Good grief. So they fill it up for 54 cents.
Yes.
And somebody came by and said something about you
getting my coffee at Starbucks when they have no idea how much it costs. Or, you know, it's just their perception of I buy a $5 cup of Starbucks. I mean, if I buy the newspaper every day and do the crossword also, you know.
Yeah, so you're smart.
Lord help me because I do that. You know, I mean, there's some things in life I like to have. A cup of coffee and newspaper.
So Aaron, let me, number one, again, I really appreciate you letting me take the time to interview you, because you're making yourself vulnerable, but you're also losing time on the corner.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this: when it comes to hope, where does Aaron hope? What would you hope for tonight, or what would you hope for tomorrow or next week?
Well, I thought about that a lot, and life just seems so short for me right now. It's just a day-by-day thing. I have things I get to I look forward to. Like tomorrow night, I'm going to have dinner over at a friend's house. She's going to make a really nice meal. I've never had a bad meal there. So I'll be doing that. I wouldn't mind getting a dog again. My old dog died in August, so that'd be nice. I'm hoping to get the truck fixed.
Okay, you're driving your mom's truck. You don't own a truck.
It's my mom's truck, and I get held for it all the time. And at the same time, I also get jobs by taking loads over to the dump also. So it's kind of a win-lose situation.
But sometimes people see you getting in an old beater type truck.
Oh,
and they say, oh, you're a faker.
I have been told that that's a brand new truck after I said it's the year 1999. I have been told that I own it and I drive it. What am I doing standing here if I drive a vehicle? Well, gas money, insurance money, things like that. You know, I mean, just because someone has a vehicle doesn't mean they're loaded with cash. You know, it just means they have a vehicle. There's probably about maybe 20% of people that sign that have a vehicle.
40%, you reckon?
20%.
Or 20? 20, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I've been in this community for 35 years, working the streets for 35 years, and I can see the difference between you and several other people on the corners and such. And it stands out to me and my wife, and I have a great deal of compassion for you.
Thank you.
And I want people to realize that you are one of a kind, but you're also someone that really needs help and assistance. You're trying to pay off your student loans, your medical bills, keep the car in good repair. You're not faking anything.
No.
You're doing what you can to make ends meet.
Right.
So let me ask you, now we've had a chance to converse with Aaron. Any change in your thoughts or opinions, and is his situation unique?
So one of the things I look for in the participants that we work with at Community Youth Services, although they're not typically his age, is his ability to project himself into the future, which says that he has some hope for himself. A lot of people who are experiencing homeless, when you ask them those future-oriented questions, they can't answer them. And those are the people, you know, and the young people that we work with at CYS that we worry about the most, that they have that inability, they don't have an ability to project themselves into the future. And that's a sign of, you know, depression and, you know, anxiety that is very difficult to overcome.
It goes back to what you were saying, Gabe, earlier, that he's always upbeat, he's positive, he's smiling, flipping the sign, waving to every car that comes by. No matter what he's met with, he's upbeat and positive. And that's what it probably captures most people's attention when they drive by. But however, going on what you were just saying, Scott, seeing somebody with hope as opposed to someone who's hopeless,
Yes.
Or not helpless, but hopeless, I can't imagine where it seems for some of these folks that don't have that degree of hope, where it seems like someone has taken the world and they've pulled the plug out from the bottom of the earth and all the colors have run out.
Yes.
I can't imagine that kind of despair. But touch on some of that you see with some of your clientele when they come in relation to Aaron.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's been a theme word for Drexel House, one of the programs. I've worked there for 11 years now and met many wonderful people. But you also, like you're saying, meet a lot of people that have gone through experiences that I haven't had to go through, a lot of trauma, people that have been abandoned as children, people that have gone through all kinds of abuse and things like that. And so, you know, one thing that's really important is the person-to-person connections, is building those relationships so that they feel like they're a person that is valued. And sometimes just those human connections help establish a foundation to where they can start looking towards the future. You know, they're moving up that Maslow's hierarchy of needs to where they're, if you give them housing, you give them food, and you give them some pathways to consider, a lot of times people make choices to better themselves and move forward with their lives.
So what services are out there that are available for someone that's not homeless? Aaron's not homeless, but he does share an apartment with, I think he said 3 or 4 other people. Are there services out there that he can apply for or kind of get into or be channeled towards that would help him out? He actually carries on the back of his sign, or one of his signs, like a budget. Here's what I need to make it for today. Here's what I need to make my student loan. Here's what I need to pay for the masks for my BiPAP machine. I mean, he just seems like he has it together, but he just can't get his head high enough above water.
I think in our community there would be different forms of rental assistance that would be temporary in nature. I mean, what you see with Aaron is that if he doesn't have a good month with what is a really tough job, standing out there during all the elements to raise funds, there are means to get temporary emergency rental assistance that may help someone get by like another month. Depending on what kind of living situation that he's in, there's potential funds to help to increase the efficiency of what home he's living in or apartment that he's living in that might help to like lower the cost of bills and increase
like energy and such.
Yeah, energy and maybe increase the health of the environment that he's staying in, because then again he's really out there day to day exposing himself to the elements and is really susceptible to other things beyond what medical conditions that he described. So he's right on the edge, and I think it's important to note that a lot of our community citizens fall into that category of being right on that, one paycheck away from being in a circumstance where they need to do something else that they normally wouldn't do to be able to survive.
Yeah, it's and this is just a quick lick of the ice cream cone, really. What can we cover in an hour? Not much, because there's so many folks out there that are in desperate need of services and help. But let's go ahead and roll the next clip. I think we're going to Natani with Community Youth Services. Yeah. Go ahead. And now I'm downtown at Community Youth Services, downtown Olympia, and I'm with Natani. Thank you, Natani, for being here. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me and making yourself vulnerable and telling us your story. Now, you're an adult. Mm-hmm. You're 21.
Yes.
You didn't always used to be an adult.
No.
Good answer. Okay. Before we get into how you came to CYS, mm-hmm. we'll just back up just a tiny bit. How did you get to Washington State, and from where did you come? So Natani, I did not know how old she was going to be when I was coming down to interview her, and so I was not impressed. I was happy she was 21 because I can show her on TV and feel free to interview her and such without a parent, and such. But what is the stereotype that the community has, or people in general have, of youth that come into community youth services? I know what the stereotype is, but share that with me. What kind of stereotype do you hear? Do they get painted with?
I think a lot of times the stereotype for young people, and what we know is that young people who are experiencing homeless, oftentimes the drivers of their homelessness is different than for adults. And I think the stereotype is that that these are young people who just didn't like the rules at their home, so they decided to run away and be on the street, that somehow that's better than the rules that they have to live by. What the research tells us and what we know by our own experience is oftentimes these young people are exiting trauma, and we hear frequently almost the same statement every time, is that they don't necessarily like being on the streets, they don't necessarily want to be on the streets, but being on the streets is safer than where they came from. And so I think what that tells us is that the stereotype is definitely wrong, is that these are not just naughty kids who decided to run away, is that they ran away from, like what Gabe mentioned, pretty complex trauma, years of abuse or neglect or domestic violence or sexual molestation, or being kicked out of their homes, quite frankly, because of their sexual orientation, and at a really high percentage, like about 40%. What the stereotype is and what we know about the young people who come to CYS are much different.
And I'll get to you, Derek, in a moment. But yesterday, now, if I didn't mention it up front, Scott Hanauer is the Executive Director of Community Youth Services. And you've been director for how many years now?
I was the clinical director for about 13 years and then CEO for about 3.
CEO, okay.
Right.
And you've done an exceptional job. And just yesterday was the fundraiser breakfast, Have a Heart for Kids.
Yes.
And a 19-year-old young lady gave a heart-wrenching story of what she's endured in her young life from the age, I think it was like 8, 9, 10, 11 years old.
Yes.
And how she has really overcome that. Now, Derek, let me ask you, stereotypically, what do you hear them painted with, how they paint the youth?
Everything that Scott said, and oftentimes you hear things like, oh, you know, these youth just aren't trying hard enough, or why don't they just? And, you know, it's a whole list of the just at the end of that. Like, why don't they just go to college, or just get a job, or just, you know, get an apartment, or just go back home, right?
Yeah.
And the connection there is that, you know, people are coming from a place of never having to experience what some of these youth have had to experience. So I think when they come to something like our breakfast and get to hear a story, or get to see something like this and hear about somebody else's story, they get more of a view of some of the trauma that our youth actually go through. And everybody's case is a little bit different, right? Everybody's an individual. So I think one of the stigmas is people tend to like coat things with one blanket for a whole population without really recognizing that everyone has a little bit different story about why they needed help and assistance at CYS.
Yeah, because it makes me feel less vulnerable, less guilty, if I can say, well, that's just a spoiled brat. Mm-hmm. They just didn't want to adhere to the rules at home. They're self-entitled. The younger generation, I can paint it any way I want to make myself feel more comfortable. But when you hear their story, it's powerful. The adverse childhood experiences and such. And hopefully you're going to break that cycle, and I know you have many times, before they get to Drexel or Catholic Community Services as well. Let's go ahead and watch the rest of that clip then with Natani, please.
I'm from Oklahoma, a tiny little town, Tuttle, and I have family in Washington, and my mom is from Washington. And it was always a dream moving up here because I hadn't even visited or anything. I had never been to Washington ever my whole life. And so coming from Oklahoma, it was kind of like, you know, Washington was just where you wanted to be. It was green and everything that Oklahoma wasn't.
It's not Oklahoma.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was on the ocean, and it had this appeal to it. And so my mom and I went out on a limb and moved up here and packed all our stuff in her car and moved up here. And my mom, in hopes that we would find jobs and, you know, find a place quickly and it would be easy. Mm-hmm. And we fell on hard times, and we were struggling, and we couldn't find anywhere to go. So.
Define hard time. You fell on hard time. It was just you and your mom? Mm-hmm. This was a year or two ago?
Yeah, it was about a year and a half ago. It was just hard to find employment. It's hard to find. We had a big dog. It was hard to find places that would off the bat accept people with big dogs, or just here the prices are different. So in Oklahoma it's easier, the cost of living is lower, and so it's just easier to find a job and make means. And so here it was just a different lifestyle, and it just, I think we weren't expecting it, or I wasn't expecting it. And so so my mom pretty much, that's when my mom brought up CYS and said there's this place where they help the troubled youth, and you know, I can't support you. I can hardly support myself. So you know, you're gonna have to figure something out for yourself. So she drove me up here, and I met up to Rosie's place.
Okay, let me stop there before. Now you hit Rosie's. Before you hit Rosie's, you have a family in Washington State. Is it in the Olympia area?
They live in Shelton. I have some family in Spokane. Okay. I have some family around Olympia. I'm pretty sure they just recently moved to Shelton, actually. But my cousin owns a shop on the west side called Private Sector Arms. And he actually owns a homeless shelter in the Philippines, which I thought was pretty funny. But I'm not the type of person where I'm not going to put my responsibilities on my family, and I hadn't really even met them my whole life, and we didn't really know each other. So I'm not just going to move up here and say, I'm homeless, you know, help me out. So, you know, they were aware of the situation, and they were living their lives. I don't, you know, blame them. I mean, I could hardly afford to take care of myself. My mom couldn't afford, you know what I mean? So
yeah. And so you and your mom had difficulty finding employment, mm-hmm. and your mom says, I can't afford to keep you or help you, whatever, support you. But do you have any idea how she heard of CYS, Community Youth Services?
She actually put herself through foster care when she was young, and she
Here?
And well, she lived in Shelton. So, but my grandma, her mom, she was a foster parent. So there was like they couldn't do it in the same county. So my mom had to go up here to Olympia to go through CYS, and they got her through school and stuff like that. So she graduated because of CYS. And
That is a cool story.
yeah, so that's why she was like, these guys can really help you. And actually, my mom is so like happy with where I am through CYS today that it's because they have affected both of our lives.
Well, I used to volunteer for CYS back in the 90s, and we've done, as a county, we've done numerous fundraisers for CYS. It's a huge icon in Thurston County for helping and assisting young people that are needing really a leg up. But also, you said your mom dropped you off here because she said she heard that or knew that CYS helps troubled youth. Were you a troubled youth?
No, she just meant like in need, not so much troubled, but in need, as far as like, you know, needing the resources or needing help in any way, shape, or form. She just knew that they had the resources and, you know, the programs, and she was just aware that they helped kids.
So now you walk into Rosie's place.
Yes, and that's where I met Gavin, and I had told him, you know, what was going on, and he was like, yeah, we have the stuff to help you, pretty much. And so that's where my mom and I went our separate ways, and
Was that difficult?
that was very difficult because I almost felt abandoned because I had never been here before. So I was almost like lost. And the culture around here, you know, kids have been homeless for years. And so the streets are all they know type of thing. And so I just did the thing where I just, you know, kept my guard up. And
Were you accepted?
I was, because I was
an outsider coming in.
Yeah, but I was accepted because I am very honest, and I'm nice, and I'm fair. So I don't lie. I don't, you know, cheat or steal, or, you know what I mean? So I'm a very straightforward person, and it was very easy for me to make acquaintances. I wouldn't so much say friends because I don't hang out with them now, but you know, it's weird. It's definitely it's hard to describe being homeless out here.
I'm going to stop there because it's obvious. It's obvious to what's obvious to you about Natani? I'll start with you, Gabe. What's obvious about her?
Well, just she's very well spoken, very intelligent person. I've never met her, but yeah, just that's what strikes me initially. Is just well spoken, very intelligent. Yeah.
Confident.
Confident. Yeah.
And I started with you because you don't know her, and I know you guys do, Derek and Scott. And so when I met her, I was just taken with how well-spoken, confident. She has a vision. Because she goes on to say in the interview, I'm going back to school. I'm going to get a degree in cosmetology. And she wanted to go on and do something else different as well and open up a business. So entrepreneurial. So she's got a lot of guts for a night. She's more mature at 19 than I was at 40, and she has a lot going for her. But it was a situation like you were mentioning earlier, Scott, that I'm done with you. Mom said I can't handle you, not because of behavioral. She's not a bad egg, but I can't take care of you, so you're on your own. And I can't imagine what that's like for a mother or a parent to do that. But now here she is somewhere where she doesn't know anybody. What can you tell me more about her that she's already disclosed? I don't want you to share any confidences.
I think it goes, one of the things in that video that goes back to what Gabe mentioned is how important engagement is with these young people. She mentioned Gavin, who is an amazing staff person, and she described pretty clearly walking into Rosie's place for the first time and engaging with Gavin, and Gavin giving her some sense of hope, some sense of we can help you through this. And we know that one of the biggest drivers of one's success versus not success is the engagement these young people have with our staff, and how fast that can happen or not happen. A lot of young people like Natani can be very mistrustful of adults, so folks like Gavin kind of have one chance to make that engagement happen. And Natani described that that's exactly what happened, and that's what then created a better future for her.
That's beautiful. Derek, you have anything to add?
I'd just say that she's a very driven individual, and we happen to be there as an organization during that very pivotal moment. She described some of the other youth that have been on the streets for years, and what we know is that the longer that someone experiences homelessness, sometimes the longer that it takes to help to get them out of homelessness. And Natani was right at that crucial crossroads, and was driven and accepting of the services that CYS had. And I can tell you that she has really basically driven her own plan since coming to CYS. We just supplied the vessel.
That's well put. Yeah. And just recently we did, in Thurston County, of course, everywhere, we did the point-in-time count, counting those folks that are homeless and in need, and identifying them and giving them resources and such. And my seatmates, Commissioner Edwards and Commissioner Blake, went out into the community north and south to help with the point-in-time count. And I went down to Rosie's place and spent several hours there talking with the kids, serving, cooking pancakes, serving breakfast and such, and then engaging with them. And I saw both ends of the spectrum. I saw a lot of Natanis, but I saw the antithesis of Natani as well. Those who have had worse situations and crises in their lives, who I would hope would come at least 50% to what Natani is. And I'm not sure, that's going to be a road, a long haul for you folks to help some of these youth out. But they're there. So at least they're there and they're eating. And they said, hey, this was the last time, or their breakfast was the first meal they had since the previous breakfast or previous lunch the day before.
It's really important to note that there are different levels on our continuum of care at CYS, and obviously Street Outreach in Rosie's Place is really casting the widest net possible to create that engagement and that trust building and those relationships. And that's the things that keep those youth coming back to CYS and Rosie's Place. And as time goes on, we're able to increase those services to shelter and housing, as well as treat some of the other things that are going on in their lives that may include behavioral health services or other things. But it really is having them come back and be that captive audience and be in our space and be safe to be able to kind of like start doing that higher level of thinking.
And it's generational, because Natani's mom had experience with community services, with CYS. And that's why when she came back, hey, Natani, you can stay here, they'll take care of you. Mm-hmm. So at least mom had the wherewithal to do that for her daughter. How can the public assist with CYS?
Well, there's a lot of different ways that they can. One way is just through our general outreach of, if you encounter any young person through our demographic ages of 0 to 24 that you believe is in need of assistance, you can give CYS a call and we'll help figure it out. They don't have to specifically know what program and those kind of things, but we really want to make sure that our name is out there. I know we've been in the community close to 50 years now, and but we're still surprised when someone says, "Oh, who are you?" So we want to get that message out. Other things in our homeless and housing services, there are coordinated entry hotlines in the community. I don't have the number with me today, but I can provide that. That helps to funnel youth into the services quickly and efficiently and get them on lists for housing as soon as possible. In other ways, we can always accept donations of socks, shirts, underwear, blankets, sleeping bags, all those different kind of things that you would consider essential and basic needs.
Got it. Okay.
One of the things I wanted to add on to what Derek said, Hutch, is that there's a recognized crisis in the state of Washington related to foster care. There are not nearly enough foster homes in the state of Washington to serve the young people who need foster care. And foster care can now go up to 21 years old. And young people in the state of Washington are now being sent out of state to institutions because there's no foster care placements. CYS is currently partnering with 12 other foster care agencies and 2 foundations to increase the number of foster homes in the state of Washington by 2,000 to 3,000 in the next 2 or 3 years. So we can always use help with our foster care program. You know, people who want to even think about being foster families would be great, but there are a myriad of ways of supporting our foster care program without having to be a foster parent.
Like the commercial says, anybody can, not everybody can be a foster parent, but everybody can help a foster family or foster kid.
Right.
Well said. Let's roll the last interview with John, who's staying at Catholic Community Services Drexel House. And then we'll chat about John. Yeah, John. Hello, and I'm here with John Colt, and we're out here at Drexel House. And John, thank you very much for making yourself available for this interview and spending time with us today.
You're welcome.
I'm very appreciative of your time. Obviously, the focus of this whole segment is on homelessness and service providers and how organizations help folks that are in desperate need of food, clothing, housing, wraparound services. And so give me a thumbnail sketch or a Reader's Digest version of how you got here to Drexel House, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and I was a hardworking graphic designer for over 20 years, and a health condition, I won't go into the whole thing, but I ended up being unemployable from my graphic design skills and ended up homeless, couldn't pay rent, and with the help of Sidewalk initially, the organization in town.
In this community.
This is an Olympia community, right? And Sidewalk, the organization in town, was the first place I went to, and they got me able to stay at the Camp Quixote at the time, was the tent city that was initiated here in town.
Downtown.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And it went from one church to another. We moved every 3 months.
I remember those days.
Yeah, and it was great because it was a home kind of a feeling. I mean, it was, even though I lived in a tent, it was a communal kind of feeling, and it worked pretty well.
Well, it was safe.
Yes, it was safe, and it was had all the services to initially that you really needed. Had bathrooms, had access to. We went to the YMCA for showers, and we used a laundry service in town, and so that was my. I did that for 2 years, and I got on the waiting list for Drexel House here, and after 2 years, I got up to the top of the waiting list and was chosen for an apartment here, and that was about. It's been almost 4 years now, and I've been here ever since, and it's been good for me here. I've gotten back into a steady schedule of paying rent, and I got on Social Security, which gave me an income, which I hadn't had for a couple of years then, and so Drexel House has done me a lot of good. It's provided pretty much anything I've needed. Mostly I live on my own situation with just like anybody else with an apartment, and I pay rent on a sliding scale it's a third of my income, so the rent's real reasonable, and so I'm here, and my next step is to, I'm not really sure yet. I want to do something good for the community, just to kind of pay back and keep on doing what I'm doing. And I like to draw. I like I'm learning how to play guitar and just doing a lot of things on my own. And for the most part, just trying to be a good citizen here and move on to, like I said, doing something good for payback to what I got from like Sidewalk and from Drexel House, and everything else that I've gotten to know around here.
So you seem very grateful.
Yeah, I am.
And when you were involved with Camp Quixote, that is the precursor. That's before Sidewalk.
Right. Well, it was Sidewalk came along right in the middle of Camp Quixote. It was just kind of getting their feet off and running.
And so when you went into Camp Quixote, you were absolutely down and out, just flat out. You were broke, no place to stay, no income, nothing.
Exactly. I was just at the end of my rope, really. I mean, I didn't know what the next step was going to be, and actually Sidewalk has just barely gotten started. Just got into the house down on 5th Street, and and my daughter saw an article in the paper about the city of Olympia was going to fund this organization called Sidewalk, and so they were brand new, and I was probably one of their first clients. And so we walked in there, got an interview, and talked to them, and they said, "Yeah, I think we can get you into Camp Quixote." So they were active when I got started being homeless. I mean, the timing was really good for me.
So Sidewalk was the portal, the entry for you to get to Quixote.
Right.
And Jill was there at the time, Jill Severn?
Exactly.
Okay, and then how long did you stay at Drexel, at Quixote?
At 2 years.
2 years?
Yep.
And they helped you transition out then? You weren't paying rent or paying anything there.
No. Right.
But that got you to the point where you could apply and get on the waiting list and get admitted to.
And actually, I got on the waiting list almost immediately from getting into Camp Quixote. With Sidewalk, they had me come up here and sign up to be on the waiting list, and I called every month, and that's what you have to do. You stay in contact with them every month in order to stay on the active waiting list.
All right, so that's John, and it was very nice meeting him, and I'm glad he did this and made himself available to me or to us. And it was obvious to me also he was homeless. He had some real other issues in his life. But he was able to get back to the point, even when he was prior when he was a graphic arts designer or such, to get back and Sidewalk, Camp Quixote, and now Drexel. And he sings Drexel's praises. How long has he been there, and how long can he stay?
He's in our permanent supportive housing program, and so there is no timeline to that.
Okay.
And something I've seen in the last decade that I've worked that I think we're doing better as a community is we're sort of through coordinated entry, which he referenced Sidewalk, there's sort of a triaging process to where people are given an actual, use the VI SPDAT tool to screen people. So people that really couldn't make it on their own, they have to have some kind of supportive services. They couldn't make it in a normal apartment. Those folks, the most vulnerable folks as scored by that tool, are now placed at Drexel House. And so I think we're doing a better job of putting people there that really need that kind of level of care, people with mental health service needs and chemical dependency needs, things like that.
Okay. How many beds do you have at Drexel? Now, there's Drexel 1 and Drexel 2.
Right.
So Drexel 1, or they're combined except for 35 beds at Drexel 2 is for veterans? Or
so,
explain that.
Yeah, so at the
Okay.
original 2 Drexel House buildings, we have a 16-bed emergency shelter for men. And then we have 26 units of permanent supportive housing. Those are apartments for disabled individuals, and those are permanent again. And then we just opened up last year a new building that has 50 units for formerly homeless veterans. And so all said, if I did my math right, it's 102 folks that we have on site at all times.
Wow. And I was at the blessing of Drexel 2 last week.
Right.
Exceptionally impressive. But still, that is serving a real desperate need in our community, people that really desperately need to be protected and helped. But it's still just the tip of the iceberg. We're only seeing, I don't know, 10% of the iceberg. In the real ocean, you see 10%. It's all that under the water that you don't see. Do you suppose that percentage is about right of how many are being served versus how many need services?
Yeah, there's still a huge need for more housing for folks and affordable housing, and then still we need some more supportive housing. And so things like the home fund that recently went through, those are the types of things that will help us build up our stock, because right now our stock of housing isn't meeting the demand that we really need in our community.
And the home fund is what Olympia voters just passed this last couple weeks ago. 1/10 of 1% sales tax or something like that, which is wonderful. Dedicated money to come in for housing. Very critical and very key. And what I want to ask is, do you provide at Drexel, do you provide a lot of wraparound services, or you help folks get to the services? How does that work?
Yeah,
if someone's in need of either mental health or other assistance?
Yeah, well, kind of both. And recently what they did, I'm a mental health professional, and so they sort of put me in the role as program manager because they realized the level of care that we're needs to come up. And so we have case managers on site, and we also have 24-hour staff, because there's oftentimes health emergencies that come up in the middle of the night, and oftentimes our staff are the ones that find people, passed out or something. We just had an individual that we celebrated his life this morning who passed away, and he had been staying at Drexel House. A lot of just people with a lot of health problems and things like that. So we either provide the service on site, and if we don't, we're working to make sure they have access to those needed resources that they want or need.
Okay. And something that kind of surprised me, you told me this when I talked to you over the phone, and you set this interview up for me, and I kind of told you what I was looking to do, and you told me a little bit about John, and I want to show that clip now about John and what we shared.
Yeah. He made a video of me, and that was the theme, was hope, and that I still, showing that I still had hope, even though he showed where I had been living downtown, and we were down in the alley downtown Olympia, and showing that I'd come from there, and then we came up here to Drexel House to show from where I'd begun and where I came to get it together again, and that I had hope through the whole thing. And I did. I really never lost hope, and that's really the one thing that if you can hang on to that, you've come a long ways. It's when things are hopeless, that's when things get really tough.
I couldn't say it better. Yeah. So I want to ask you, how long has it been since you've seen this?
Oh, it's been a while. Yeah, I have a couple little photographs of it, but that's the one. That's right from that video.
Yeah, because when I talked with Gabe about this yesterday, he described this to me. Yeah. I said, "Are you serious? Do you still have it?" And he says, "Yes, I have it."
Yeah, those were all over the banquet that was put on with
Yeah, he said what you described about hope was incredibly intuitive, and gave other people hope. Yeah. And so, I didn't know about this, and I told him that's where I was going. It's with hope, and being path goal oriented, and so that's perfect for the segment, and it.
Well, when you first said hope too, that's the first thing that came to mind was that video and that presentation that he put on with that, and that was at the banquet that they had for donations to keep this place running.
So I thought that was very key because I wanted to dispel some of the stigma, and wanted to focus on the homeless and the people that really need some help and services from the community, but also hope. And Prosecuting Attorney John Thunheim does this whole big thing on the science of hope. He's been doing that for years, and it's incredibly powerful. And so what can the public do, real quick, because we're running out of time now, what can the public do to help assist Drexel or Catholic Community Services? Yeah,
well, Catholic Community Services has a lot of programs. One way, if you want to volunteer, you can volunteer at the Community Kitchen, which is, we partner with the Salvation Army and provide meals to people that are homeless every day. We send 4 meals lunches a week to Community Youth Services at Rosie's Place. Our volunteers make those. And so you can contact our Community Involvement Coordinator and volunteer there. At Drexel House, we have welcome home baskets that volunteers will put together that include everything you need to get started in your new apartment when someone moves in, with new pots and pans. So we accept kind of new items for that, and you can contact us if you'd be interested with putting one of those together. And you can also just get involved with your social groups and churches and things like that. I think that's really important, to just get involved and be aware of what's out there and what's available for folks so that you can refer or be a part of change in your own community.
Perfect. And before I get to final thoughts, I want to let people know that your Board of County Commissioners, our ideology is to help these folks. And you've heard Drexel 2, Catholic Community Services, Rosie's Place, Community Services, and Camp Quixote and Sidewalk. And these are just a few of the organizations out there that work together, Catholic Kitchens, Community Kitchens, and such, helping those folks that are in need. And Thurston County, for housing and community renewal, this year we will be donating out granting $6.5 million to social services, $5.3 million. Thurston Mason Behavioral Health Organization for mental health services, $160,000. The treatment sales tax that goes out to numerous organizations to help folks with mental health treatment and substance abuse, $5.6 million. Veterans, $317,000, for a total of over $18 million. And still, we're turning people away that have the handout. And I'm talking about the handout, I'm talking about the organizations that are looking for support and help, and we don't have enough money. It drives us nuts that there's so much in need, and not everybody gets some funding, and not everybody gets full funding. So we're doing what we can to get the word out and to get the money out and get the services based on the community need, but also on the investment we're getting back for that as well. A lot of tracking. What I'd like to do is ask for some final thoughts. Please, any final thoughts? Derek?
Yeah, sure. I guess I wanted to just start out by that at no time ever in the history of Thurston County are we as organized as we are right now about working with individuals experiencing homelessness. Through Thurston Thrive's Housing Action Team and the sub-teams of that, through the Hazardous Weather Task Force, through coordinated entry, which I do want to mention, the points of entry for single adults, a sidewalk for families as Family Support Center, and for youth and young adults as Community Youth Services. We are coordinating our efforts to make sure that the most vulnerable get into housing as quickly as possible with what housing resources that we have. Part of our 5-year plan strategies include looking at additional resources like the Home Fund and looking at different ways of funding things in our community that we haven't thought about before. All the organizations I mentioned and many others utilize the local resources to also be able to attract state and federal dollars to really make a full, to try to round out that funding and draw the most in our community that we can to help work with this. I just want everyone to know that this is a very coordinated effort, and people are working daily, weekly, monthly on this issue, and we're going to continue to be coordinated and keep working on this.
Got it. Scott, any last thoughts? We've got about a minute left.
Just real briefly, Community Youth Services also provides services and programs to keep young people from entering homelessness. And Gabe kind of made a reference to, their agency and CYS partnering. I have to compliment Thurston County in terms of developing a system of care where agencies are now more collaborative, working together, as opposed to other counties where I worked where it wasn't that way at all. So this county is amazing in terms of that development.
Oh, it's nice to hear that. Gabe?
Yeah, I think I would just say again, there's ways out there to get involved in the community here, and I think if you learn some of the stories like you're doing a great job showing today, I think you start to have change in your heart, and you feel, not that is just some guy at the corner with the sign. You know a little bit about their story, and it humanizes them. So I just think, get to know people and look for ways to get involved.
Beautiful. Well said, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me today. I want to thank our guests for joining me today, Scott Hanauer, Derek Harris, and with Community Services, and Gabriel Ash of Drexel House. I can't thank you enough for the important work that you do in Thurston County. A heartfelt thank you to Thurston Community Media and staff for their work and efforts on these programs. I'm Commissioner John Hutchings. You can follow me on Facebook at John Hutchings, Thurston County Commissioner, District 1, and thanks for watching Thurston County Connection.